When I got married, I never said I'd inherited a few apartments from my dad. And thank God I kept that to myself, because just a week later my husband made a move that proved keeping quiet was the smartest thing I've ever done. Can you even imagine the betrayal? Just 1 week after saying, "I do," my husband, the man I just promised forever to, showed up at our door with a notary. Not with flowers, not with breakfast, but with a lawyer, to dictate terms about my money. And thank God, I'd kept quiet about the 3 apartments my father left me. Because if I hadn't, that morning would have been a catastrophic, soul-crushing betrayal. It was barely 10 a.m., and the doorbell wouldn't quit. Who on earth is knocking this early? I mumbled, still half asleep, my newlywed bliss thick in the air. Mark and I had been reveling in our early days of marriage, staying up late, lost in each other. Morning still felt like the middle of the night. Before I could even fully open the door, there stood Mark, my husband, looking strangely formal, his jaw tight. And beside him, a nervous little man with a leather briefcase. "Arthur Finch, the notary," Mark said, his voice flat, devoid of the usual affection. My heart plummeted straight to my stomach. "Alara," he continued, "we need to talk. This is Arthur. We need to sort out a few things." Sort out what? We'd been married for 7 days. Anxiety twisted inside me. I still hadn't told anyone about the inheritance. 3 properties in different parts of the city, all from my incredible father, Richard. He'd always been a smart investor, quietly accumulating real estate, and he'd left them to me with explicit instructions to keep it quiet. "You never know how money changes people," he'd said, "especially in a new marriage. Keep your independence." I hadn't fully understood him then, but I was starting to. It wasn't about greed. I just hated how money tangled things up. More than anything, I wanted Mark to love me, not my real estate portfolio. And I certainly didn't want him to control it. "Good morning, Mark," I forced a cheerful smile, ushering them into the apartment we now shared. "Come in, Arthur. Nice to meet you." My mind raced. What could this be about? A promissory note? A prenuptial agreement? My father's words echoed in my head. Mark immediately surveyed the apartment. A flicker of something I couldn't quite place in his eyes, then he waved sharply. "Come on, seat the guest." I scrambled, offering tea and cookies, basic hospitality battling with my rising panic. As I poured the tea, Mark didn't make small talk. He leaned forward. "As you know, my family has always been careful with finances. My parents instilled in me the importance of clear arrangements. Now that we're married, it's time to take care of some paperwork. We just want to avoid any future issues regarding property." He motioned to Arthur, who looked like he wanted to sink into the sofa. "Arthur has prepared some documents. We believe it's important to be fair and transparent." I tensed. "What kind of documents, Mark? What exactly are we talking about?" I tried to sound innocent, but a cold dread was settling in. "Oh, nothing major," he said casually. "Just a prenuptial agreement and a note confirming that any property gained during the marriage will be split evenly. We also wanted to clarify, just to be sure, that you didn't have any significant assets before the wedding." My heart cinched. There it is. He was fishing, but I was ready. I'd suspected this side of him might emerge. "Oh, assets." I smiled sweetly. "Well, I saved a bit for the wedding. Have a few small savings. Nothing major, really." "I see," he replied, his eyes narrowing. He clearly didn't believe me. "And what about property? Did you own anything before the marriage?" My own husband is asking me this, I thought, but I just shook my head gently. "No, nothing serious. I used to live with my parents, that's all. My father has some property, but it's all tied up. He only gave me some family keepsakes." I bit my lip. My father did give me keepsakes, but he also signed over 3 apartments. He'd asked me for strict confidentiality. So, nothing. Mark repeated, wide-eyed, as if surprised I could have married him with nothing to my name. Well, then all good, Arthur. Show her the agreement. I took the papers. The prenup was standard in case of divorce, jointly acquired property. Nothing too alarming until one clause leaped out: if one spouse, meaning me, is later found to have significant assets, those assets will be considered joint property unless specifically stated otherwise as premarital. In other words, he was trying to trap me. If I had something valuable and didn't declare it now, it would automatically become shared property. If I said I had nothing, I was signing away everything. I pretended to read slowly while Mark lectured. You know, life is unpredictable. You come from a modest background. Why complicate things? That's why we decided to handle this now. Anger boiled inside me. To him, I was just some simple girl. No name, no status, no assets. Fine. But if I told him the truth, that I had 3 apartments, all rented out, generating a very comfortable income, I knew what would happen. He'd demand control or start making plans for my money. No, I need to talk to my father first, I said firmly, handing the papers back to Arthur. I'm not signing anything without consulting him. Mark's jaw tightened. Your father. This is our marriage, not his. You should trust me. I do trust you, Mark, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. But my father has always guided me in financial matters. It's only right I speak with him. Arthur, the notary, looking uncomfortable, checked his watch. If we're signing today, we'll need to do it before lunch. I have other meetings. Mark sighed, a show of annoyance. Fine, but I expect this to be resolved quickly. This is for our future, he looked at me as if to say, don't mess this up. The door clicked shut behind them, and I felt a wave of relief so intense I almost collapsed. I called my father, Richard. Dad, it happened. I choked out, tears finally falling. Mark brought a notary to the house. He wants me to sign a prenup and declare all my assets. I knew it, my father's voice was calm but firm. I warned you, didn't I? Now listen, do not sign anything. Tell him you need more time to review it with a lawyer, and do not under any circumstances reveal the apartments. Not yet. We need to assess his intentions first. And that's how our married life began, with my husband's demand for a prenup, a secret inheritance, and my father's warning echoing in my ears. It was just the beginning of a long, messy personal saga. My father, Richard, was a self-made man. He'd quietly built a small real estate portfolio over decades, always believing in solid assets. He raised me to be independent and financially savvy. When he drew up his will, he specifically left 3 properties to me, separate from other family assets, telling me, this is your safety net, your independence. Don't let anyone control it. He advised me to keep it confidential, especially from any future spouse until I truly understood their character. My parents didn't need the money, and they trusted me. I met Mark in university. He was ambitious, charming, and from a family that valued status and wealth. I loved him, but I'd also seen his parents' subtle ways of managing assets, their expectations of him. I saw how he treated his parents with deep respect, but it was almost a transactional respect, built on inherited expectations. I understood their world, but it wasn't mine. During our engagement, he'd often comment on money, his aspirations for a comfortable life, which always felt slightly off, a little too focused on material gain. Still, I pushed past it, believing love would conquer all. I kept my father's inheritance a secret, hoping to build our life on genuine connection, not my assets. After we married, we moved into the apartment Mark's parents had given us. It was nice, comfortable, but I never felt like it was truly ours. Mark's parents still had keys, walking in unannounced. Mark seemed fine with it, viewing it as a family privilege. I tried to stay polite, but deep down, I wanted a space that was truly ours, somewhere we made the rules. Still, I held back from suggesting an alternative. After all, I had options, those 3 apartments. But imagine me saying, "Hey, Mark, let's move into one of my places. I never showed them to you, but I've got a few." That would raise 1,000 questions, and I wasn't sure how Mark would react, especially after the notary incident. What if he got upset? Not to mention his parents, who'd surely go into overdrive the moment they sensed I had a way out of their son's reach. So, I waited. Then came that visit with the notary. My secret almost slipped out, but I managed to keep it hidden, thanks to my father's prior warning. Mark wasn't happy, but I insisted on talking to my father. He gave me a week to consult, clearly expecting me to come back and sign. Instead, I called Arthur, the notary, and politely declined, stating I wasn't ready to sign any agreements so early in my marriage. Mark was cold for days. But he didn't stop. He started subtly scrutinizing my spending, my habits. "You do realize you won't be able to live on just our combined salary, right?" he'd say. "Why not?" I looked up from my laptop. "I work, too. The pay isn't amazing yet, but it'll grow." He shook his head. "But you're still studying. Who knows when you'll make good money? Meanwhile, we have to run a household, think about children, and everything else." "We'll manage," I said, trying to stay calm. "And if anything comes up, my parents are happy to help." "Your parents?" He raised an eyebrow. "Well, they're not exactly well off, are they?" "Not like my family." He'd compare our families constantly. "Mark," I said, "we'll figure things out when the time comes. Please don't worry so much. Everything seems so simple to your generation," he sighed. "But you have to plan ahead. Take this apartment, for example. It's in my father's name, but sooner or later it'll belong to me. And in case of a divorce." "Why are you jumping straight to divorce?" I snapped, unable to hold it in. "We just got married." "I'm not implying anything." "Life is unpredictable," he insisted. "Do you have any significant finances, property? My mother told me your father was quite the businessman." A chill ran through me. "A test." I closed my laptop and looked him straight in the eye. "My father left us warm memories and a few family keepsakes. That's all," I said, quiet but firm. "I see," he drawled, studying me. "I was just wondering. I figured he must have stashed something away. If he did, we know nothing about it." I lied with a straight face. He studied me carefully, but I'd learned to answer these questions without flinching. "Well, if you say so," he finally conceded, standing. "But think about what I said." After he left, I let out a sigh of relief. Yet again, I was reminded telling him about the apartments would be like handing him a loaded weapon. A couple of months later, Mark's pressure changed tactics. He started subtly stirring the pot with his family, leading to uncomfortable dinners where I felt like I was under a spotlight. His Aunt Clara asked, "Alara, you studied economics, right? So, you're good with money. That degree won't go to waste. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate?" "Well, I don't exactly have that kind of capital for real estate, and we just got married, so we're a bit tight on cash." Aunt Clara replied. "But maybe your father left something behind. I heard he was quite resourceful." "Maybe," Mark chimed in, a little too eagerly. "But Alara claims she didn't inherit anything." "Oh, if only," I said politely. "I'd invest in the stock market or maybe buy a little apartment to rent out. But for now, that's just a dream." I felt a knot of resentment tighten in my chest. My own husband pushing his family to corner me. One small victory wasn't enough to win the war. Mark was relentless. One of the apartments my father left me was in a high-end part of town. The others were modest, but this special one my dad had renovated beautifully. I'd been renting it out, and the tenant was moving. I quietly contacted the realtor my father used. Then, pure coincidence or a setup, I still don't know. Mark's parents started talking about finding a bigger place. Mark mentioned Madison Avenue, where my luxury apartment was. Madison Avenue? His mother gasped. That's an expensive area. Yeah, but it's a good investment if you're thinking of upgrading, Mark said, a glint in his eye. I froze. Please don't let them come across my rental listing. But I was too naive. The realtor sent a photo of the apartment's gorgeous living room to a potential renter, who apparently shared it with Mark's mother. She recognized the furniture. Worse, the address. She vaguely remembered my father having some property on Madison Avenue. Enough to spark suspicion. Mark's mother asked the friend to schedule a viewing and went along. She recognized the interior, familiar decor, even family photos I hadn't yet taken down. When they left, she asked the realtor directly, "Who owns this apartment?" He eventually slipped, telling her it belonged to a young woman named Alara, inherited from her father. That was all Mark's mother needed. The realtor called me afterward. "A woman came by today asking questions. She figured out it's your apartment. You might want to be ready for some follow-up." I felt the floor drop out from under me. So that's it. Mark's family knows. And Mark himself will know soon. That evening, when Mark came home, I knew I had to tell him. It was better coming from me than from his mother. I braced myself. "Mark, there's something I need to tell you," I began. "I've been putting it off, but I think it's time. I own an apartment. Actually, 3. He froze, his hand on his coffee mug. 3, he repeated, like I was joking, but his eyes were calculating. Yeah. 3. My father was into real estate. When he passed, everything came to me. I didn't say anything because I was afraid of how you would react. You were so pushy with the prenup. Always talking about money. I didn't want our relationship to be about money, or for you to try to control what was mine." "Wow," he said, sitting in silence. "How long have you known?" "Since my father signed them over. About a year before we met. Everything's legal. I rent them out. Earn income. Why didn't you tell me before?" His voice was cold. Accusing. "This is a massive secret. You lied to me, you broke my trust." Tears welled in my eyes. "I didn't lie. I withheld information because I was scared. Scared of this exact reaction. Scared you'd try to interfere or demand I hand anything over. Scared you'd see me as an asset, not a wife." Mark stared at me for a moment, then stood up, his face a mask of anger. "How could you? How could you hide something like this from your husband? Your husband? You deliberately deceived me." He paced the room. "And I'm guessing my mother figured it out, which is why you're telling me now." I nodded, telling him the whole story with the realtor. "I see," he sighed, but it was a sigh of frustration, not understanding. "All right, but this changes things. Everything changes now." He didn't hug me. He didn't offer comfort. He saw opportunity and betrayal. "So, what do you plan to do with the apartments?" he asked, his tone now assessing. "Keep renting them out. We can certainly use the extra income, or maybe we sell one and finally buy something we both like." The subtle shift from you to we was not lost on me. "What about my mother? What will she say?" I asked, testing the waters. "She's going to be furious that you kept this from us." "From me?" he corrected. But we'll handle it. Together, he added, but his smile felt forced. In that moment, I realized my fears were justified. My father's warnings had been prescient. The very next day, Mark's mother called, demanding we come over, something important to discuss. We knew important meant a confrontation. Still, we went. When we arrived, Mark's parents, Aunt Clara, and some other relatives were waiting. A family tribunal. His mother gave me a cold stare. We found out that you own 3 apartments, she said like an inquisitor. And you've been hiding this from us. From Mark? Yes, I do, I replied calmly. It's an inheritance, personal property I received before the marriage. But why did you lie? Aunt Clara jumped in. We asked several times, and you said you had nothing. I didn't lie. I just didn't think I was obligated to tell you, I countered. It's personal business. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Well, now it's out in the open, Mark's father said, trying to be diplomatic. You have to understand, we're family. Things like this are better shared openly. When I saw how aggressively you were all poking into my and my parents' financial background, I decided silence was safer, I admitted. Yes, it was a mistake, but not a huge one. Not one that justifies this kind of ambush. Not huge. Mark's mother snapped. Don't you see how this reflects on the whole family? Now people will think you've been deceiving us or that we're gold diggers. Mom. Mark stood up. But it wasn't to defend me. It was to defend the family reputation. This is between Alara and me. It should have been handled privately. No, son. It's not just about you. When you got married, we all became one family. And I don't like that your wife had 3 apartments. Who knows what else she might be hiding? Maybe she doesn't even plan on having children. Maybe she's just using our family for gain. That's outrageous. I exclaimed. What a horrible thing to say. Enough. Mark raised his voice, looking at me. Yes, Alara owns some property. That's great. But the secrecy, it's a problem. He didn't defend my right to privacy. He sided with them. Because she kept it a secret, his mother insisted. That means she doesn't trust us. And if she doesn't trust us, who knows what else she might do behind our backs. Mark's father surprisingly chimed in. Mark, you were so insistent about that prenup. Maybe that pushed Alara away. No wonder she kept quiet. Are you taking her side, Dad? Mark snapped. I'm on the side of common sense, his father said. Alara's choice was questionable. Sure, but I understand it. You pushed her. We all did. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I love Mark. The apartments were a gift from my father, and what I do with them is my decision. Mark and I will figure things out together. Maybe one day we'll use the money to buy a home, or we can live in one of them. Why not? Exactly. We can live there or rent them out. We'll decide together, I said, looking pointedly at Mark. I'm ready to handle everything properly, but the apartments are mine. I'm not giving them up. I'm sorry, but that's final. But if you use your inheritance to buy a new home, that home becomes marital property, Mark's mother interjected, which means Mark has a right to it. So what? I shrugged. He's my husband. Of course, I'd share with him, but what I care about most right now is that no one interferes or tells us what to do. A heavy silence followed. Mark's mother eventually exhaled slowly, like she was finally surrendering. Fine, I won't argue anymore, but understand this. In our family, we've always talked things through. I just don't want your secret properties to come between you two later on. It won't, Mark said finally. We'll deal with it. We left shortly after. I caught Mark's mother watching me with lingering disapproval, but it was Mark's behavior that stung the most. He hadn't truly stood up for me. Life moved on, but it was strained. The trust was broken. Mark kept trying to advise me on my properties, pushing to sell one to invest in our future, meaning his vision of our future, which heavily featured my money. I ended up moving into one of my more modest apartments, claiming I needed my own space to focus on my career. It was an act of defiance, a quiet assertion of independence. My father was relieved. Good, keep your distance and your assets safe. Mark was furious, but I stood my ground. This is my home now. If you want to visit, you're welcome, but it's our rules here. The truth was, my trust in him was fractured. We were married, yes, but living separately for a while felt like the only way to breathe. Then his father's transport business hit a rough patch. Mark's family became desperate for money. Mark began to pressure me directly. Now's the time. Invest in my dad's business. Your money can save us. It'll be a great return. Mark, I'm not ready to invest in the transport business. I don't know the field, and I'm not comfortable risking my savings without guarantees. But we're family, he argued, repeating his mother's old lines. Is that how you treat your own husband's family? I don't trust unverified investments, Mark. It's my decision. He hung up. Another storm was coming. He started telling his family I was selfish, greedy, unwilling to help. At family gatherings, he'd barely acknowledge me or make passive-aggressive comments. A year later, Mark and I started talking about children. I wanted to start a family, but the constant financial tension, his need for control, it was poisoning our relationship. Mark was still pushing me to invest my money or to declare it ours. He even suggested using one of my apartments as collateral for his father's struggling business. That was a firm no. Then came the turning point. Mark's father called in the middle of the night. Mark had been rushed to the hospital. Severe hypertension, dangerously high blood pressure. I rushed there the next morning. He was admitted immediately, and the doctor said he needed urgent treatment for cardiovascular issues. When I arrived, he looked pale, tears in his eyes. How are you, Mark? I asked gently, though my heart was a tangled mess of anger and concern. Not good, he whispered. The doctors say I need surgery on my arteries. It's expensive. I don't know where we'll get the money. My father isn't earning anything. He was weak, vulnerable. It was the first time I'd seen him truly helpless. $30,000 was no small sum, but not impossible for me. If I really wanted, I could dip into my savings. And now came the moment of truth. Was I ready to help the man who had tried to control my assets, who had accused me of lying, who had sided with his family against me? Could I rise above all that for the sake of his health and his life? I took a deep breath. We'll figure something out, I said softly. Don't worry. What do the doctors say? They want to do a bypass surgery. It'll cost nearly $30,000 plus rehab. He started crying again. We just don't have it. My heart ached, but I knew this time I wasn't going to ask for any repayment. That would just feel cruel. He was sick. I wasn't going to make him sign anything. There are no terms, I said quietly. We'll help. Health isn't something you turn into debt. Mark looked at me through tears. I don't know what to say. I've been so awful to you, and now you want to help. Yes, I do, I said. Because you're my husband. No matter how many arguments we've had, your life still matters to me. He broke down in tears, and it felt like everything was in them, pain, fear, and perhaps regret. The doctors asked us to step out, saying he needed rest, and I promised we'd sort out the payment as soon as possible. On the way out of the hospital, I felt this deep sense of relief intertwined with a profound sadness. No matter everything that had happened, I wasn't going to let him suffer just because he didn't have the money. Maybe, just maybe, this would finally soften his heart toward me. We paid for the surgery, and a week later, it was successfully done. Mark was moved to a regular room. The doctor said he'd need rehabilitation at a health resort next. He looked better, even though still weak. When my father and I came to visit him, he smiled weakly. "Dad, thank you." "Focus on getting better, Mark," I said. "When you're out of here, let's try to build a more peaceful relationship." He nodded, and tears welled up again. "I've been a fool," he confessed. "I let my family's obsession with money, with status, poison our marriage. I let it cloud my judgment. I'm so sorry." "It's all behind us now," I said. "Let's focus on getting you better." We talked for a little while longer, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly equals. Maybe he really had come to understand how wrong he'd been. My father, who had been quietly observing, put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Alara. It takes courage to forgive." He then looked at Mark. "Son, I hope you've learned a valuable lesson about what truly matters." The next couple of months, Mark went through rehab. We paid for his stay at the sanatorium. I'd stopped counting the cost. After years of fighting, I just wanted some peace. Even his parents seemed a bit warmer toward me now. They probably saw that I didn't abandon their son when things got tough. In the evenings, Mark would call, genuinely apologetic, thanking me for everything. When Mark came home, we threw a little celebration. My parents and his parents were there. It was still a little awkward, but less tense. For the first time in years, Mark raised a toast. "To Alara," he said, his voice sincere. "I want everyone here to know she's not just my wife. She saved my life, and she taught me a lesson about trust, about what's truly valuable in life, and about respecting someone else's independence. Thank you, Alara." I sat there smiling, hearing the sincerity in his voice. I kept thinking, did we really just reach a truce? Maybe after all those years of battle, we were finally heading toward peace. Of course, life's never completely perfect. There are always little things that pop up. Mark's parents still offered unsolicited advice now and then, but Mark would quickly shut them down, firmly defending our choices. He stopped hinting that I owed them anything financially and began to respect that I had my own path. He even started to appreciate my professional skills. "You know about finance. Can you help me figure out how to manage my father's remaining business assets?" he asked one day, calmly, without that usual controlling tone. I gave him a few suggestions. He listened. Things began to settle down. We started building on our plot of land. My sister Chloe designed the plans. Mark visited the land almost every week, genuinely excited. We had a beautiful baby boy, Owen. Mark was an amazing father, completely devoted. When Owen was small, we'd set up a small wooden cabin with a few beds, a table, and chairs, enough to stay for a couple of nights. Owen loved it. For him, it already felt like a real countryside home. One day, as I was chopping firewood near the cabin, Mark walked up to me and said, "You know, I don't say this enough, but I'm so proud of who you are. You stand your ground. You don't let anyone push you around, but you're still kind to people who've hurt you. You're incredible." "Thank you." I smiled. "And you've done a lot, too. You could have stayed angry, tried to get my money, but you changed. You chose us." "Because I love you," Mark said simply. We hugged under the wide blue sky, feeling like all of it, carving out our independence, defending our boundaries, even clashing with relatives, was worth it for moments like this. In the end, we found our way to understanding, even if it wasn't instant. And now I often think back to that day when I was younger and far more naive, standing at the threshold of my new married life, hearing the doorbell ring and finding my husband on the doorstep with a notary. It's been 5 years since then, but it feels like a lifetime. I still tell myself, thank God I kept quiet back then. Because if I had told him about the 3 apartments from the start, he would have done everything in his power to take control of my inheritance and my freedom. Our marriage might not have survived that kind of pressure so early. On the other hand, I've come to realize, sooner or later, the truth comes out. What really matters is having your spouse stand by you when it does. Mark's attempts to control my assets were doomed from the start. In the end, it was his health scare that opened his eyes. He saw who was really there for him, who was willing to help without conditions, and that finally changed his attitude toward me. Some might say the whole thing sounds like a fairy tale ending, but the truth is life is messier than any novel. There are still new chapters ahead. Finishing the house, raising Owen, maybe even having a second child. Mark's parents, though calmer, are still not entirely easy. Every now and then, his mother will have a flare of possessiveness, but now Mark firmly reminds her, this is our family. We're happy to hear your advice, but the decision is ours. The most surprising part is that after his surgery, Mark started talking to me about his own insecurities, about the pressure he felt from his family to be successful and how he thought my money would solve everything. It's a shame it took me this long to realize, he said, looking out the window as we sat in the kitchen having tea, Owen playing nearby. But thank you for giving me the chance to make things right. My heart softened, and I realized I was genuinely glad. Somehow, we had gone from being adversaries, or at least rivals, to being people who could talk, listen, and support each other when it mattered. As of now, life is calm. We're still living in one of my father's apartments, which has truly become our home. Meanwhile, we're slowly building on our plot of land. Owen goes to kindergarten. Mark picks him up sometimes, and they've found their own rhythm. No more notaries showing up at our door. No one's trying to tell me how to spend my money. And on my end, I support Mark and his family when I can, now out of love and choice, not obligation or fear. Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries and not let anyone cross them. That, I think, is the real outcome of this long story. My marriage to Mark was tested by fire, from my inheritance to his need for control and the way we made choices together. But we came through stronger, more united than ever. We share the same goal now, to live with love, raise our children, and build a home. My financial independence is still intact. I still rent out the last apartment, which gives me a safety net. Mark has come to see that what matters more is an honest relationship with me, built on trust and respect. That's the foundation we're trying to build on. Yes, we still see life differently, but the aggression and need to dominate are gone. Sometimes I think back to those early days after the wedding, the very beginning, when Mark showed up with a notary and demanded a prenup. I think how differently things could have turned out if I'd folded then, or if I'd fought back too hard. Thankfully, I had the sense to stay quiet at the right moment, to protect what was mine, and to find a balance between independence and keeping peace in my marriage. I suppose you could call this a happy ending. No fairy dust, just a good, real-life kind of ending, the kind that feels earned. Looking ahead, we're planning to lay the foundation for our house next year. If we manage the budget wisely, maybe in a couple of years, we'll have the walls and roof up. Or it might take longer, and that's okay. The main thing is we're doing it together, with no pressure from anyone. Sometimes I catch myself smiling, imagining us in our future home, sitting by the fireplace. Mark's parents are there, too, peacefully chatting with me about garden flowers. Maybe his mother will bake pies and tell Mark how sweet Owen was as a kid while Owen rides his bike through the yard. No more notaries, no more ultimatums, just a family. Of course, life doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. New challenges will come, but I've learned the most important lessons. Protect your boundaries. Learn to say no, and still stay kind. And if someone asks me, what's your biggest secret? I'd probably say, know when to keep quiet about your money and know when to give it freely, especially if it can save someone. That's the tricky art of marriage, where everyone deserves their own space but no one forgets what it means to show up for each other. So yes, our story has been a journey. It started with that fateful knock at the door in the first week of our marriage. And now we have reconciliation, a son, and plans for the future. A lot could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And I can say with full confidence, when I got married, I didn't mention the 3 apartments I inherited from my father. And thank God I kept quiet, because just a week later, my husband showed up with a notary. That chapter is over now. Ahead of us lies a bright, wide-open future. One where we're no longer opponents, but a united team. What do you think? Have you ever had to keep a secret in a relationship for your own protection, or for peace? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below.